Greetings, precious friends. Aunt Patty's back with you today in my kitchen, and we are going to make my version of chaffles, carnivore chaffles. This particular version does have a little bit of non-carnivore ingredients. There's a little bit of vanilla and a little bit of cinnamon because these are going to be aimed at a more traditional breakfast style waffle, but you can leave the vanilla and cinnamon out and completely make them completely carnivore. And you can also add any other kind of flavorings you want. You can add a little Parmesan cheese, or you can add some everything bagel seasoning, or anything you want to make them more useful as like bread. So you can use them as sandwich buns or hamburger buns or anything you want. There's also some baking powder in here, and this is a controversial subject because a lot of commercial baking powder has some cornstarch in it, and that's of concern to people. So you can do this without any baking powder at all by separating the eggs and then whisking the eggs into a foam and then reincorporating them at the end. And I'm not going to do that today, but I'll do that in another video another time. Okay. But as of right now, absent the vanilla and cinnamon, the only non-carnivore ingredient you're going to find is the baking powder. So if baking powder doesn't bother you, we're all set. Right? Here we go. So right here, you will need a food processor for this recipe. There's a lot of recipes for chaffles that just use shredded cheese and you mix the egg directly in there, and yeah, that's fine, but I really appreciate the texture of the chaffle when I make it this way. So, you know, you do you, but this is about what I like. So we're going to do this. So the first thing I do is we got 2 cups of shredded mozzarella cheese. You can shred your own. This is pre-shredded, and I know cellulose, we've talked about that. I don't find that it's a problem for me, but if you find that it's a problem for you, you get a block of low moisture mozzarella cheese, grate it yourself, then you don't have to worry about it. This is low moisture mozzarella cheese, shredded. 2 cups by volume. And we're going to run this and chop it up really super fine in the processor. Now, you can see this is really fine. It looks like, you know, wet sand. That's what you want. You could even do it a little bit finer than this if you want to, but I don't think that's strictly necessary. Come on, stand. Cooperate with me here. Okay, now, here I have a teaspoon of baking powder mixed with a 1/4 teaspoon of xanthan gum. The xanthan gum is there to keep the mixture thick enough so that it doesn't run out of the waffle maker. You can skip it, but your final batter is going to be pretty runny, and that could be a problem. So just keep it in mind. A lot of people consider xanthan gum a carnivore thickener. Some people don't consider it a carnivore thickener. I don't have a problem with it. And so it's also going to have about 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon in here, which we already talked about. So a teaspoon of baking powder, a 1/4 teaspoon of xanthan gum, and a quarter to a half a teaspoon of cinnamon, depending on your preference. Now, if you are going to put xanthan gum in your recipe, you need to disperse it in your baking powder, or you need to sprinkle it very carefully, evenly on top of your cheese. You cannot put it in after the wet ingredients have gone in, because it will immediately clump up on contact with liquid, and you will never, ever, ever get the lumps out unless you strain them out, in which case you've strained out the xanthan gum and there's no point in putting it in. So disperse it in some kind of powder. If you don't want to use xanthan gum, if you don't want to use baking powder, then just sprinkle it very carefully directly on the cheese shreds and mix it in a little bit with a few pulses of your processor. So we're going to put this, sprinkle that on. Or alternatively, what you can do is you can disperse it in a little bit of egg white powder or whole egg powder of the xanthan gum, if you have one of those things. Just about a teaspoon of egg white powder or whole egg powder for a quarter of a teaspoon of xanthan gum should work really well, and then sprinkle it on here, because you do need something to disperse the xanthan gum. I'm telling you, don't mess with xanthan gum. It's really irritating if you don't get it managed properly. So here we go. We're going to pulse this in. And I've just pulsed it until you can no longer see any like streaks of brown from the cinnamon. That's a good way to make sure you've gotten it all the way pulsed in. Now, I have 2 ounces of cream cheese. And it's refrigerator cold because it doesn't really matter. You can soften it if you want to, but in this application, it doesn't really matter. So we're going to pulse this until the block of cream cheese is chopped up and pretty well distributed. You don't want to blend it until it forms a ball at this stage, because it will eventually if you go too long. Because that's going to be inconvenient. It's going to take you longer to mix it up. So again, we're going to show you what it looks like. See, it's getting a little chunky. It looks a lot more like wet sand. Okay. See this? It kind of looks, if you press it together a little bit, it kind of looks like a cauliflower floret. But this is the correct consistency. Like I said, don't let it go till it goes into a ball. Please, please pulse this. Don't let it run. And we're also going to need our scraper, obviously. You can just look down in the bottom and make sure there's no loose stuff that's on the bottom that's not getting incorporated. Now, here I have 6 eggs with a teaspoon of vanilla put in. You can see the little vanilla slick in there. And I just put the vanilla in with the eggs because it's convenient. And it helps it to mix in evenly. So I'm going to just dump in a couple of those eggs. Excuse me, got that on backwards. Now you could put this in on another machine, I suppose. You could put these in while the machine is running, and I suppose that would be optimal, but I have such a tiny feed chute in this model that I don't want to risk trying to pour eggs through there. If I take this thing out, see, it doesn't run. So I wish I had a wide feed chute on this model, but I don't. So I'm going to pulse this just to get it worked in. You don't have to completely blend it. just to get the eggs started. Another couple. Oh, well, what the heck. You can do it 2 at a time. See how it's kind of spinning around afterwards? That's why I usually don't put all the eggs in at once, because then they swim around for a long time. Get it? Pulse it until it really starts to look like oatmeal. Let me show you what it looks like. See how it looks like oatmeal? The texture. And now that it's on its way to being pretty well combined, we're just going to put it on and let it run for maybe 60 seconds until we have a pretty homogeneous batter. Now, it won't be completely homogeneous. You will see teeny tiny little specky lumps. I think it looks a little bit like grits or cream of wheat, if you can see. You can see the xanthan gum is already starting its work, and it's about the thickness of ordinary waffle or pancake batter, right? Now, at this stage, if you want to, you can increase the fat by adding a couple of tablespoons of melted butter if you want to. I don't generally. I think there's plenty of fat in it as it is. And besides which, if I want to add fat to it, I want to add the butter on top of it at the end, like a traditional waffle, because I just think that tastes so much nicer. Okay, we're going to walk over to the waffle maker and let it heat up. So I'm going to pause the video for just a sec, and then I'll see you when the waffle iron's heated.